and welcome, welcome to this little conversation we're gonna have. Not me really, but the four of you are gonna have. So really quickly before we start with the whole academic thing, um, we're gonna present you all. First of all, we're gonna present Kiyoshi. Kiyoshi has a PhD right now. He's doctor now. Well, Kiyoshi is a sound designer and musician based in Mexico City. He has worked for over 15 years in the film, advertising, and music industry. He has recorded and composed music for shorts, feature-length films, and uncountable commercials in local and international markets. His work as sound designer, editor, and mixer has been shown in festivals around the world and won the Mexican Academy Award for the Best Sound in 2015. He is also a university professor who teaches sound design to film and digital media students. Ale and I, we know him from this. Next, we have Radeya. Amazing Radeya. Radeya is an award-winning filmmaker and animator residing in Perth, Western Australia. He graduated from Curtin University, where he studied a double degree of marketing and screen arts, and his main passion lies in animation. He directs, writes, animates, and does sound design and music for all of his short animated films, including The Quiet, which has won over 100 awards in film festivals around the world, and is an Oscar qualified, making the long list for Academy Awards for Best Animated Short earlier this year. So Radeya, I know him from this because he was part of the festival of KINOGLAZ last year, and me and one of my friends, Sabina, we watched The Quiet, and we like slide through his DMs being like, oh my God, this is amazing. Congrats. And he was nice enough to follow us back, so this is how we know Radeya. Next up, we have Ale. Ale was a really close friend of mine. Ale studied communication at the Universidad Iberoamericana in Mexico City. She specialized in the area of sound communication in terms of sound design for film and audiovisual projects, as well as musical. She is interested in the intersection between applied research on topics of sound and sound art, with disciplines such as psychoanalysis, gender studies, literature, and philosophy. Since she finished her degree, she has collaborated with groups of women in film and theater, as well as with Radio UNAM, for the generation of radio and sound content from a gender perspective. She seeks to delve further into the relationship between electronic music, modular synthesis, women, and feminism. This is Ale. And then we have our dear Kevin, who graduated from the prestigious Berklee College of Music in 2019 with a bachelor's degree in film and video game composition. He has been involved in projects such as Netflix series Someone Has to Die and Midas Favorites. He has also composed original music for the Netflix short film The Divinity Streak, Toro De Oro, and the award-winning documentary Cuban Earth. So how I know Kevin is basically because I have this project in which Ali is helping me, and he really liked it, so he texted me, and we were like, okay, Kevin is really cool. Let's get on this. So without further ado, I'm gonna leave Kiyoshi to start this table. I hope you all know each other a little bit more after this. And yeah, I'll mute myself now.
Okay, thank you very much, Alexa, for those wonderful introductions. They always sound so formal and amazing, right? I sometimes impress myself, no, when I hear that. So I would like to start off, if you don't mind. We just heard sort of these very official sounding blurbs, but I would like to hear from you guys in your own voice. How would you describe yourselves in terms of your work, or what is the main activity you do, or how do you think of yourselves as creatives right now? I know that's something that changes every day. You know, one day you're more of a musician, the other day you're more of an engineer or whatever, you know, but right now at this moment, how would you describe yourself? I don't know, maybe if you want to start, Radia.
I think I'd describe myself as, yeah, I guess it's tricky because, you know, there was all that fluctuation going on, but, you know, filmmaker, animator, creative, it would probably be the main kind of keywords I would use. I mean, with a lot of my short films, you know, animation is like a huge part of it, and it's always something I've always loved. It's something that, yeah, I think it's kind of limitless in terms of, you know, creativity, and you can, you know, create things that you might not be able to create with a similar budget for a live action film. But I think, you know, with all my works, I, you know, I do the sound design and the music and that kind of thing, but I feel like I wouldn't describe myself as a musician in that sense. Maybe just because I feel like I'm just kind of like making it up as I go along. I don't know what I'm really doing. But yeah, I think
most musicians are just making it up as they go along, right?
Same.
all right, well, that's comforting. But I mean, I really love it, and I really enjoy the process. And like all parts of the creative process, even when I do know what I'm wanting to do, and even when I'm just like going into the unknown. So yeah, I just say a creative is probably what I'd describe myself as. Cop-out answer.
Alejandra, you want to describe yourself?
Yes, okay. This is difficult, but I think I've always been kind of an ambiguity, just because I've never really defined myself just like in a certain category. I've just been very flexible and just like all over the place, kind of chaotic, I would say. But yes, I'm a sound designer as well as a sound artist, which is really not the same as a musician. Sound arts can be particularly musical. However, you have sound arts that are very diverse in content and in technique. But I don't know, it's just, I think, I'm more in the in-between, because I create musical things, but it's not really music in the, academic way of perceiving music and technique and just the tools you use to create music. For me, it's just very, very different, I would say. The sound design I have created is for all women made projects in film and in theater. And it's been just a very interesting journey, just because it has made me kind of perceive the way we create sound for film in a very different manner than what I learned at university, and the way that I learned how to create certain processes, I would say, or just the way we are taught to follow a certain hierarchy, or some instructions towards how to make sound for film, or just the tools we use, or I don't know. It's just, I've learned to, I would say, deconstruct those processes. And I think that would define me very well in my arts, the process of deconstruction of how we normally would make art or sound for film, which is the topic we're talking about right now. So I would say it's a process of deconstructing the art of making film, that I would define myself as that, like deconstruction of the processes in which we create.
Okay, that's a bit harder for me to write down, but I'll keep that in mind.
You know me, Kiyoshi.
I know.
You know me
I was
very
expecting
well.
this kind of an answer. But yeah, you touched a few subjects that maybe I hope we have enough time to delve into them. But I think that yeah, you know, when schools are businesses, right? So they have to make it easy for people to study and understand and learn things kind of quickly. You know, you got one semester to, so there's a sort of advantage to making things fit into very specific boxes so that it's easy to teach and learn. But when you get out there and start working, you know, those boxes don't really fit in the same places as they did in school.
Yeah.
So I understand what you're saying. That's something I'm sure, Kevin, you felt too from studying at Berklee, which is, you know, a school that is, you know, constructed entirely of turning music into like an academic endeavor, no? So I'm sure you sort of understand what I'm saying as well.
Oh,
Anyway,
100%.
please introduce yourself as in your own words, and we can keep talking about that.
Yes. So it's interesting hearing Ale say her approach to filmmaking and sound, because as she is very, as she said, like very diverse, not like very gray in the areas that she's able to touch. I have made a point in my life to just blitzkrieg onto one skill, which is being a composer. Purely for the fact that like I think in my opinion, there's so much, people need everything, right? People need people that are super diverse with their skill set and all that. But I think it's better for me to just do one thing and be the best at doing the one thing. I think it's worked great for me. So yeah, what I am is I'm a composer. I can do this for like video games as well as film, which is weirdly different. Like we can get into a little bit details later on, but yeah, I'm a composer, and I came from the rock background. I used to play in bands and tour and all that kind of cool stuff. But as I started Berklee, I studied music. I became much more academic in the way I appreciate music. And but yes, going back to what you were saying, Kiyoshi, like yes, they teach you a certain way. They have to almost make it very square for you to conceptualize and understand. While you're in school, yes, study it, buy the book, do it, but as soon as you leave, just forget it all, because the real world is, I've done some sound design because I had to. I've had to write music that I would have never expected, study. Like you just have to be very like ready to do everything. Like Yoshi, it mentioned the value that you've done both composing and sound design, and Radilla, you've done also composing and animation. Like we all know that in the real world, you kind of like have to do sort of everything. But if I were to define myself one thing, I'm a composer.
All right, great. Well, I'm actually very excited to have this conversation. I've been waiting since a few weeks ago that Alexa contacted me, and I started being familiar with all of your work. Of course, Alejandra, I've worked closely with you in a few of your projects, so I was already familiar. But as I was mentioning to Alexa before we started, I recently finished my PhD, and my investigation project was about collaboration and creativity in film and audiovisual production, right? From a psychoanalytic standpoint. So this conversation is basically exactly in my wheelhouse. And so I'd like to, if you don't mind, establish a few ground rules, I guess. Not that it's my place to establish them, but some suggestions, I guess. I'd like to ask one question specifically targeted towards one of you, but I would also like to hear each of you answer that question, even if it's not specifically designed for you. And also, if at any time you have an idea or something that you want to share, just raise your hand, and we can listen to each other in that it doesn't have to be a very structured thing, right? But let's try not to speak over each other, because in Zoom that makes it doesn't make much sense, right? Let's see if we can start with Radeya. I'd like to ask you about, let's see, you describe yourself as a filmmaker, and as you've mentioned, you do a lot of the work yourself, the sound and the music, as well as the animation, and obviously you developed the story on your own, and you were you do everything, I guess, on your own, right? So creatively, that's that would sound like it's a very positive thing. You know, you can do whatever you want, right? But on the other end, it's also, I guess, kind of scary, because you're the only one that's making all the decisions, right? So if something doesn't work, you kind of have to figure it all out on your own, right? You're out on your own, and you know there's nobody to blame, and there's nobody to bounce off ideas with or anything. So I was wondering if you could talk to us about that, and how, if you struggled with that, or if that's something that comes easily, or you prefer to work on your own, or you know, or there's just something out of necessity, you know.
Yeah. Well, I think to start off with the whole, you know, doing sound design and composing, did actually come out of necessity to begin with. For my first film I made in high school, I created, you know, these visuals, and then I realized that I would have to have a soundtrack. And I was a broke high school student who really couldn't afford to hire a composer. And also I felt like, you know, licensing pre-existing music for it didn't really feel right. So I thought, okay, I dropped out of music in like year 9, but I'm just gonna try and like create music myself, I guess. And like, I think I was very daunted by my prospect. I had like no idea, you know, where to start, or you know, how to go about it. But over time, I, you know, really fell in love with the music creation process, and it really kind of, you know, brought out another side of me that I didn't really know existed. And then so since then, even though at first it was out of necessity, I've kind of kept doing it because I love that process so much, and because I enjoy, you know, finding, okay, what's this, the angle for this film gonna, like, you know, sound like? Why, you know, what kind of sounds do I need? What kind of, yeah, what kind of instruments do I use? What kind of things do I make? And so, yeah, it was a really, yeah, even though like still sometimes I'm very much daunted by, okay, I have no idea what music I'm going to make for this, but I'm just going to try and, you know, experiment and see where things go. Yeah, now it kind of comes out of a place of, I guess, the love for it. But yeah, you're absolutely right in terms of how it can also be very scary. There's kind of no one to really, I guess, have that conversation along the, you know, the process. And it's kind of like, okay, well, I'm just gonna have to trust my instincts and trust my intuition. But I think family members come like very handy for that, in terms of like almost like a test audience. I'm always like getting my brother to like, oh hey, you look at this, like what do you think of this? Or and my dad actually, he narrated a lot of my short films, and so you know, when I'm directing him, like, because you know his voice is the main thing I'm kind of using, and like, you know, recording in the studio. And so in those kind of moments as well, it's really great to bounce ideas off each other and to kind of work with someone that you've known your whole life. So yeah, I think I do kind of like the loneliness at times, but other times it can be very yeah, isolating and scary, but it's kind of that balance of the two.
Okay, Alejandra, I think that something very similar happens in the work that you do as well, although the material that you work with is, or at least in the project that I had the pleasure of accompanying you with, the material that came with the material with which you started producing sound art or musical sounds with was the product of conversations and collaboration. What you were doing was mostly on your own, right? So I don't know if you recognize some of these feelings.
Yeah, it was, I wouldn't say it was a lonely work. I would say I never really felt I was doing it on my own, like at all, because it was, as you said, something regarding collaboration with other women. It was my final project for with which I graduated. So it was a very big project with very specific research, which lasted for like a year or so, right, Kiyoshi? I think it was very, very, like a very long time with the research process. However, I think I was at all times in conversations with these women, which whom I interviewed, and it was with their voices that I created musical instruments and created a piece with those with their voices. But it was kind of a more of a metaphorical thing, because I was creating music with the conversations that that we had in the interviews, because I recorded all the interviews and then made transcriptions of them. But it was very interesting because my piece is kind of a metaphor of those conversations, and of course, like woven together and intertwined in different narratives. However, they were all together. So I was never alone in this process. I was always accompanied by their voices and listening to their voices in a metaphorical way, but also in a literal way. So it's kind of, it's strange. It's a bit bizarre what I'm saying, I guess, but yes. And also in the work that I'm doing now, it's never been on my own. Especially it's weird because the path that life has taken me, and especially regarding my final project, my thesis, it was about how can I introduce this? In simple words, it was about the process of listening to women and the process of representing women in the field of sound. And so it's strange because now I've been working with women-only teams in the field of sound and in the film industry. And it's strange because I didn't really look for that. It just came to me, like these women just came to me and they were like, let's do this, let's collaborate, so all the work that I've been doing, it's with women, with all women teams. And it's been really, it has revolutionized, I would say, my workflow, as well as the way I collaborate with other people, especially with women in this case, because I've been working with women. But it's really been very, I don't know, it's given me a great insight into teamwork, but specifically, and regarding what I said before in the introduction, I think it has to do with the way women relate to each other. And because it is very different towards the way we communicate with other people, especially in a very male-dominated field. Like here in Mexico, the field of sound is very male-dominated, and I would say in other countries as well. But here, it's just very different. And so the way we are making film and the way we're creating all these things that aren't really, like, I would say, cinematic in a way, like they're kind of this fusion with lots of disciplines: theater, film, just visual arts, poetry. And so in this way of not really defining like all these projects in a certain category, or just not wanting to belong to a certain, box, the way we were saying that in university we were put like in this kind of boxes just because that's the way it is. And as you said, that's the way it works. And yeah, like, but when you get out there, and for me, this working with all women teams has been, all of these boxes are just like, they do not exist anymore. And we have found a way to build I would say, bridges to kind of make all these disciplines that are very different work together. And I would say that that's the way I am working now, in collaboration with other people, specifically women, in the building just interdisciplinary and multifacetical discourses or narratives. So it's just, yeah, that's how I work with other people now.
Yeah, I just have a question for Ali. Is your thesis piece called River or Rivery or something like that?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because I was just checking you guys' work and earlier today, and it's very beautiful because it's like you said, maybe not necessarily, it's like a piece of music, because sound really can be justified as music as well, just as much as playing a piano. But I just really like the different concepts you touch on that. It's like 7 minutes and a half, no? Something like that. And it was awesome. Like, it was really an experience, like definitely like super cool.
Thank you. Yes, I think, and you having studied in a very, like you said, academic institution, I think it would be a little bit of a contrast, right? Kind of, because as you said, my piece is not really, I never know how to define my work, because I wouldn't say it's music per se. I would say it's kind of something different that might be musical, but it's just not quite music as we perceive music today and have perceived music for a very long time, since the great composers, right? Like Bach, Mozart, and Beethoven, others. So I think that what I'm trying to do is kind of just propose a new way of perceiving musical instruments that differ greatly from the classical instruments we know, and that are made from people's historicities and people's histories and people's narratives. They are made from those stories and those histories. And that for me is very important, because I think it's opening a path for active listening and for listening differently to the way we, yes, to listening to each other, and as well as collaborating. And I think, yeah, so all the instruments in this piece, I made them all, and it was a very complicated process, right?
You sampled, no? People's voices. And
yeah. Like, I sampled specific words that I recorded. Like I said, I recorded all the interviews. So as I was listening, I perceived certain patterns in between, like the different narratives between the women I interviewed. So I was looking for just one word that would kind of represent the whole thing, the whole interview, women as a whole, like their discourses. And so that word, I made it into a musical instrument, and I made all the instruments work together in order for making this piece that actually follows their journeys in the interviews. And so in a way, they're kind of talking to each other without knowing in the piece. Like all the instruments work together, kind of. You listen to all these different stimuli coming from this ear or this ear, or just like they're all over the place, kind of, right? So I think as we're listening to these women speaking like in a metaphorical way, because it's not really, it's their voices, but you are listening to something else, right? So
Yeah.
I think, yeah, that's what I was trying to do, kind of just in a very you know, to summarize my whole project, because it's more complicated than that, but yeah.
It worked. Whatever you were trying to do, definitely.
Whatever it was, it worked.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
I can ask you a question. Again, this is not a question I'm asking Kevin, but it's something that I'm expecting all of us to answer in a way, right? So feel free to jump in and add whatever you feel that you want to add. So I watched this video where you're talking about the process of composing music for this film about bullfighters, right? So and there's this scene where you talked about that composing it was difficult, and it takes you out of your sort of your comfort zone, and you have to do something you haven't done before, or you have to really step up to the plate.
Cuando me enseñó el corte Pedro, lo primero que dije fue, ¿cómo chingados le voy a hacer? No tenía idea de qué componer. Realmente tenía que convertirme yo en un mejor compositor para poder hacer la escena. Y se logró. Se logró, y la verdad estoy muy feliz con el resultado.
Right, you have to sort of like be a real composer, kind of. You feel the pressure, so to speak to sort of speak in the terms that Alejandra was speaking. You really have to face the tradition of music with which you are entering into a dialogue. When you see yourself as a composer, right? Not as a, if you see yourself as a sound artist and everything you do is a deconstruction of everything, right? You can basically make it up as you go along and it's going to be fine. But if you're, saying my work is as good as all these other guys, right? I suppose that makes you feel a lot of pressure. Not that Ali's work wasn't also significant, and you probably felt a lot of pressure, Ali, but that's what stood out to me, Kevin, in your in the piece and how you were speaking, and I got the sense that that was really a big effort, right? So I wonder if you can share with us some of what that feels like and how you deal with those moments where basically you feel vulnerable, right? You're like putting yourself out there and you're having to make something up, compose something,
yeah.
Make something out of thin air and have it work, right? And you kind of, as I was saying before, you're not sure if it's gonna work. Is this what people are expecting of me or not? How did that feel for you? Or
I mean, you nailed it right in the head, Kiyoshi. Like, I think I am particularly good at talking myself up, but when it comes time to actually do, I'm like, oh my fucking God, For this project in particular, I found it through Kickstarter. That's actually how I met Ale. Like, I saw her project on Kickstarter, El Árbol Naranja. So this one I found again through Kickstarter, and I talked to the director. He happens to be also Mexican. Also came to United States to the film. We got along super well. And at this point in time, the movie wasn't even recorded. I just had the script, and I loved it. But so I've been kind of like talking with this person for months, and then when he actually, recorded the thing, went into production, now in post. At this point, we've had so many calls, right? So I was like, yeah, no, we can do this. Like, super. Don't worry about the music. I will handle it. But when I actually saw it, I was like, oh my God, I'm not good enough for this. And of course, Pedro, if you ever listen to this, shout out, love you. But yeah, when we were talking, I was like, very enthusiastic and like excited, and he would tell me ideas, and what he wanted essentially for that movie was sound, because the movie takes place in the 70s. It's a period drama. And he's a huge fan of like Ennio Morricone, right? So he was like, I sort of want what he did back then. And like, those are big shoes to fill. I did, this guy is obviously one of the greatest of all time. So like, I did my best to approach it as much as I could. So yeah, like, again, we talk, enthusiastic, yes, Ennio Morricone, I will nail it, don't worry. And Zoom call, and I start sweating. It's like, all right. But that particular scene that I talk about in the video, there's no music, there's no dialogue, no sound effects. It's only music, and it's mostly in slow motion. And it's about like 3.5 minutes. And it was only music. And the director just sort of like didn't necessarily have that scene planned to be that long and that, but because he's been talking to me and blah, blah, he kind of like trusted me, blindly and foolishly of him. To
Some
play
guy he met on Kickstarter, right?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So much faith in just this young person, right? But it worked, you know, like I said in the video, I knew I had to become a better composer than I was. And it's easy to call yourself sound designer, composer, but when you're actually in front of the piano, you're like, this is a fraud. Like I always have like imposter syndrome that someone's gonna like knock on my studios, like, no, you're not a real composer, and I'm gonna be raptured and you'll never see me again. But yeah, no, writing for that movie was particularly challenging and super, super rewarding because I had to study, you know, 10 years worth of music from the 70s from many composers, looking at the score, seeing how the movements move, like the bass, how it moves. I see that the strings, he tends to do this with the strings, and like, you know, all these things to kind of like adapt it to a 70s sounding score, but it's modern. You don't want to sound just like the 70s because it's going to sound super old-fashioned and antiquated. You know, you want to look at it from a lenses. Like, yes, we're in 2020, 2021, looking to the 70s. So that's sort of the approach that I have. I'll show you guys the scene if you guys are down in a second. But that's sort of what I do. Like I said, just talk myself up, find myself stumbling into situations of like, yeah, you have this thing for Netflix in a week, and you do this, like, yeah, sure. But then I just freaked the fuck out for like 3-4 days, and then the final 4 days I just do everything, you know. I wish I was more like, you know, just, yeah, sure, whatever, but definitely I am faking it till I make it.
Fake it till you make it. I guess I'll write that one down, no? Yeah, that's how we all start, right? You kind of have to choose the projects you wish you could do, and then actually just kind of make it up as you go along, as we were saying from the beginning, right? You just kind of figure it out as you do it.
And at the end, you're like, yeah, no, you know, it was great. Had so much fun.
Exactly. You sound like you know how to do it all along. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Radia, you want to add something here, or?
Yeah, I mean, I guess when you're talking about, you know, the pressures of, you know, composing and sound designing and that kind of thing, I think previously it was something that, you know, again, was out of necessity and that kind of thing. But when it came to one of my main short films, The Quiet, it's a film that's all about sound. It's all about silence and how that translates into isolation and loneliness, about a character, like, in his attitude towards silence.
Silence is my only solace up here, 70 miles above the surface of the earth. Here I get to live out my childhood dreams of floating among the stars, witnessing the poetry of the universe. Can you hear that?
In a variety of contexts throughout his life. And, you know, it's like human stories on Earth, but told through celestial imagery, but there's no sound in space. So, you know, it was trying to create parallels between everyday household sounds and how that would kind of visually connect with the universe. And so with that kind of premise, I kind of realized that, oh, I know, like sound and music, and the lack of sound and music is going to be especially important in this. And so I was, feeling, I was also sweating because I was like, okay, I'm going to have to really try and like, balance this out and really try and figure out, what is the best sounds to tell the story? What's the best kind of music? And yeah, I think that was definitely an eye-opening kind of process as well. But absolutely, fake it till you make it. I totally believe in that as well. And and then now that it's done, we're like, okay, knew it all along. But
yeah, I knew all along it was going to work, right? Yeah, that's how it feels on this side, right?
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it's like since and kind of since then, since that was like the main project that like kind of really prioritized sound the most, after that things I kind of felt a bit more comfortable. But it's always such, I just like love music so much, just in terms of how powerful it is, really, just to be able to shape emotions and to like literally shape the feelings of your audience. Recently, I watched there was a short film I made that was, it had no that kind of dialogue, and so music was the only really kind of sound we heard. And so, and for that film, I actually collaborated with a composer over in Melbourne, and we had sessions over Zoom, composing together, and it was also another kind of eye-opening kind of experience. And he was like this amazing, like accomplished, like composer, and sound design. Like he'd done that for like his, forever. And so I kind of was also, I guess, feeling that pressure of like, oh my gosh, okay. I've also like felt like fraud, like imposter syndrome, like, but it was like I learned so much from him. And so yeah, I think pressure always comes at all, no matter what you're doing kind of in this industry, and it's always a great thing, a motivator, and a great thing to learn from. But yeah, my 2 cents.
Okay, Alejandra, you wanna add something here, or?
I don't know. I just oh, sorry, my dog is making noise. I would
Sample
say
your
that
dog.
What?
Sample it.
Yes, I'm gonna record her. Did you hear that? Sorry. I think what I've had to deal with the most is, of course, more than imposter syndrome. I think it would be with the pressure of finishing a project, because I think we've talked about the importance of collaborating and teamwork, and that for me, like the difficult part for me has been, getting to the deadlines and being like, I have so much to do still, no? Like that for me has been very difficult, especially because some of the projects I've been in have really been very, like, in a very small time frame. I would say they gave me the material, they gave me what I had to do, and we talked about it and stuff, but the time frame was just so small. And I would say, like, this is so ambitious. How am I going to complete this task, or how am I going to finish it, and within the deadline and the date due and stuff? And that's tough because then you are very overwhelmed and you get very stressed, and then you stress about if you're doing a good job, if you're making it right, if you are, accomplishing whatever you discussed with the directors. And so I think that has been the most difficult part of it all, for me. And yeah, I think that's it. The pressure of finishing on time, I think.
Yeah, I think that crunch to meet the deadline is something anyone who works in, you know, audiovisual production or media production or creative work of any kind, we're all familiar with you know, deadline crunches and that feeling, which is basically like you're like cramming for an exam, right? Like it's, you know, it's tomorrow and I have to do all of this, and, you know, and my computer crashed or my hard drive failed or whatever, you know, we've all been there, and it's terrible. It's a very anxious feeling, right?
Yes, and it's
you have
like,
one shot and it's this one, and you have to make it, and it has to work, right?
Yeah, and it's hard because sometimes I can be very very tough on myself and pressure myself even more, and then make myself like I don't know, overwork. Yeah, I overwork myself most of the times. And you know, Miki Yoshi, I tend to complicate myself so much and tend to say, yes, I'm going to do this and accomplish this and that. And then the deadline comes and you're like, no, I can't do it all. Like, this is just too much, right? And
yeah, so some people say that the great works of art, they're never finished, they're just kind of abandoned, right? You just kind of have to say, all right, I'm done, whatever, you know, and move on, right?
Yeah.
So so I have another question, which is actually for you, Alejandra, and I guess it's sort of summarizing a lot of what I perceive that you do, which is that in your case, we'll hear from that Radia and Kevin, but in your case, I get the sense that your work is at the same time, the stuff that you do is like something you do creatively, and it's something you do because you're interested in having a career in it, right? And it's technically interesting and it's intellectually challenging, but at the same time, it feels like this is actually you are living like your politics, you know, your viewpoint towards life and towards society and towards everything that's going on around us. That is what you are also doing and living and constructing through your work, right? So I'm wondering if you can sort of speak to that a little bit, and how, I guess it's another dimension which would add some pressure or some feeling of vulnerability or any of these other ideas we've been
Oh yes,
speaking
definitely.
of.
Definitely, I think that all the projects I've been in until recently, they all in a way relate to my viewpoints and the way I perceive lots of things regarding gender and feminism, especially because, as I said, I've been working with all women teams, and that has been very interesting because, as I said, I really didn't think I would be doing this. Like I don't know, when I was making my final project for university, I didn't really know what I was going to do like next. Things just came to me, and I think maybe at an unconscious level, I kind of just, I wouldn't say attracted these projects that came to me, but I would say that I feel very fortunate because I am working on projects that genuinely relate with me and with the things I've lived and with what I've studied and what I think and my viewpoints. So I think I feel very fortunate regarding that. And yes, of course, there's a lot of vulnerability within that because, for instance, there was this really big project. Well, it was really big for me. That is named Mujeres Pájaro, Crónicas de Vuelo. I wouldn't know how you translate that into English. I'm not sure.
Chronicles? Maybe.
Yeah, kind of. It was a project which was originally staged for being a play and presenting a play in theater, and they traduced that original script, which was made for theater, into like a film script kind of. And so it is a very touching project, especially for women, because it portrays the different realities that different women live on a daily basis, in a very poetic and metaphorical way. But somehow a lot of those things that were portrayed within the project really kind of translated into some processes that I lived and that I lived in my childhood and that I now live in my adult life. And so it is very interesting when you do projects that really touch you and that really make you vulnerable, but not only towards yourself, but also make you vulnerable towards the people you're working with. So many times we think that we have to be really like solemn and serious and just like very professional with the people we're working with, right? And very straightforward and very just, keep it professional and keep a distance with the people we work with, no? Because that's the way we've been taught and that's the way it kind of works. And for me, it has never been this way. For me, I've never really had this distance between the people I've worked with, between the women I've worked with. And this kind of opens something, not only in an unconscious level, but also in a very conscious level. And that also opens certain processes that are within yourself and that kind of move you and make you create art and create and do your job in a way that you are kind of transferring all this you're feeling into that piece of art, right? And into that, like, whenever you have this communication with the people you're working with, I feel like you feel more free to manifest your feelings and your inner being into whatever you're doing. So that for me has been like, I feel very fortunate to have this to have been in the projects I've worked in, because I feel like I am free to be vulnerable. I am free to relate openly towards the stories I am making sound for, and also to really have open conversations and relate to the women I've worked with, and that has been truly wonderful. And right now I am working for a project which is like a very I never know how to define the projects I'm in. Like it was also a project that was meant for theater, but they made it into a kind of it is kind of a film, but it's really not. Like I don't know. It's just an audiovisual project, which in which a lot of women are acting, but they are portraying monologues and different monologues about different things, but they're very, very, I don't know, like I know I'm going to suffer a little bit editing all of the like the dialogues and making the sound design for this film, because oh my God, it's just so, I don't know, I don't even know how to describe it. It's just so, it's touching, yes, because I can relate as a woman to many of these stories that they're telling, but also it's just I don't know, like it really makes me feel fragile and vulnerable. And as I like to say that I work with listening and with the act of listening. And I like to say that I really want to make people listen, specifically to women, in a way that is not patriarchal, and in a way that really kind of makes people that make people like really reflect upon those things that women are saying, or the context in which a certain history takes place, like a certain narrative takes place that is being portrayed by a woman, right? So whenever I'm listening to this, like something just I don't know, it's really strange. And it's a little bit exhausting sometimes, like working with all these projects that really talk about realities that we as women are living, on a daily basis, and also historically we have lived. So yeah, for me, it's been tough. It's been exhausting in a way, but it's been very refreshing. And also I've learned so much, so much. Like I remember when Mujeres Pájaro, when this project I was talking about earlier was, when we saw it, when we got to see it, like all of us, like the team, like all the creatives, and also some other people, we when we finished watching it, we all just came together and we sat in a circle and we started talking to each other and what we thought about the project and what we thought about ourselves, and we were just like making ourselves vulnerable towards other people regarding this project. And I remember I said something specifically about my grandmother. Like we were talking about our mothers and our grandmothers and the women in our lives, and I just wanted to cry so hard. Like I was talking about her and I was feeling like I was going to cry. Like I was really feeling vulnerable with them. But I think that is very like special, you know, because sometimes we work with things that really don't really connect with us. But I've had the fortune to work with people and with projects that really touch me in different ways. So yeah.
It sounds like the collaborate, if I may be allowed to sort of rephrase your ideas in heteronormative patriarchal terms, right? It sounds like the projects you've worked on, the collaboration is founded more on sort of a recognition of a shared experience, as opposed to a collaboration that is based on like shared objectives, like let's do this together. It's more like, oh, you know, this is what we have in common, let's work together, right?
Yeah, and also what we do not have in common. Like it's also the recognition of our differences. It's not just what makes us similar, it's what makes us different and how we can, you know, create conversations upon that, right? So yes, yeah.
Oops, sorry. Okay. Well, thank you, Alejandra. Kevin, Radia, do you want to say something here?
If I may, Radija. Yeah, I really like what you guys were saying. One of my favorite teachers ever in school, her name is Ruth Mendelsohn. She gave me a class on documentary speaking, and she talks a lot about activism and how much music and her contribution have affected, you know, brought real results, you know, from environmentalism, feminism. I've done some stuff with the environment myself, and yeah, like as from the sound perspective, you really have to, she always would say it, and I will never forget, she always said, the more personal, the more universal. So it's that you have to really be vulnerable with your feelings and how you contribute and how you play within the project that you're talking about. Like if I were to you know, do music for a film on feminism, something similar, how do I relate to the movement? What have I observed from people that I love, who are women who have suffered all these patriarchal things? And I cannot pretend to be someone else that I'm not. So I can only channel it within myself. But I think you're always surprised of how much people can relate. You know, you maybe you think that your particular scenario or life or event or whatever is very, you know, catered to you, but it's not. And it's always, the more vulnerable you are and the more honest you are with it, the more people will relate to it. And that's when she will say it, the more personal, the more universal, the more personal, the more universal. Like it served me so well.
Yes, I would have to agree with her 100%. Yes. Radia?
Yeah, I think, I mean, yeah, a lot of the works that I've been doing, some of them are, I mean, they're all related to, like very closely intertwined with kind of my viewpoints or experiences or feelings. And so, you know, a couple of my works have been social commentary, like activism based. So one of them, the one that I talked about, which had like music all the way throughout, was all about environmentalism, climate change, and like the state of the degradation of our natural environment. But then, I guess trying to put a creative spin on it. So it was kind of experimental, incorporating like the 7 deadly sins and 7 of the most famous paintings in the world. So I guess, and then, again, all, like you said, Kevin's all kind of based on what, your kind of personal experiences, but what you observe about, what's happening around you and what's going on in your lives, but also the lives of so many others. Working with, I guess, less on the film side, but, videos about, PSA announcements. So like, I did one recently about like fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. And so I feel, I guess, film and this medium is so powerful because you can really educate and you can really spread awareness about so many things to so many people in a way that's engaging, hopefully, and that speaks to a lot of people. But what you said, Alejandra, as well about pouring out all your feelings into a piece of art, I thought was really touching. And I think it's something that on any project you're really working on, I feel like there's always that kind of aspect, either like intentionally or unintentionally, that you really kind of I guess immerse all of yourself into even outside of the actual during the film, like kind of making process. For my film The Quiet, which is all about like isolation and loneliness, I do like my kind of alone time to an extent, but that filmmaking process was very much isolating. I was working on it, a majority of it, while I was on exchange in China, and it was an amazing time, but a lot of times I'd be like in my dorm room late at night, just like working away behind my laptop on it. And so it was kind of really channeling all of that, with, I guess, those themes directly into the work. Or another kind of big part of it is like siblings and relationship with like my brother. And so, I'd actually used, like in the sound design, I'd found some like old home videos from my brother and I playing like 10, 12 years ago and put them in. And, I guess it kind of became a personal kind of experience within actually making it. And so, yeah, definitely, I think your experiences really helped to shape the works that you're doing.
Yeah, I think that just telling a story, in the sense of making a film or making a piece of music or a piece of sound art, just saying something, raising your voice is resisting, is political, it's activism, right? When you're not a person that's supposed to be telling stories, or you're not supposed to be raising your voice, or you don't belong here, or you're different than anybody else, and you do something and say something, or try to speak out or stand out or call attention to something with the tools you have at hand. In the case of you guys, it's creative work, right? It's imagery, it's sound, it's music. That's politics, that's activism, right? That's an idea I try to always transmit to people who think that making movies is just like red carpet and like fame and fortune in Hollywood and stuff. I think storytelling of any kind is the same as activism, as resistance, right? It's something that really changes ourselves and the people around us and the world, right? In ways that sometimes we don't even expect or we don't, anticipate. And it's something that I see clearly in everything that you guys here today are doing, right? So I don't know if there's anything anybody wants to add anything right now. No? Well, I guess I don't have any more questions. I don't know if you guys have any questions for each other. That would be cool too. Or for me, I guess. If not, oh, yes, Radia.
sorry, yeah, I had a question for Kevin. I just really wanted, I was really curious about what you said about how you composing music for films and also video games, and how like different that was. And I just wanted to hear a bit more about your, I guess, process for each of them and how you kind of, I guess, the different, the differences in those, two approaches.
Totally. Thank you, Radhika. Basically, film, you know how it starts, you know how it ends. You know what I mean? You have the picture on your computer, and you can, you know what's coming. You can alter everything, and it's just sort of you print it essentially, and then you play it, and that's just kind of how it is. Final. The thing with video games is that it's interactive, so it's like the player may never leave the little zone, and it's not like your music is just gonna like end, like whoop, and then. So essentially, a lot of music is loop based. So you write a loop in such a way that you can just loop it forever, and you'll never hear like a click, like that it starts over. That you have to work with the reverb tails so that it can like tails into the next section of the loop, but it's never actually sounding like it ends. Another main thing that you cannot do on video games, which a lot of old video games have done, obviously games in the 90s, early 2000s were still in its infancy, having melodies or like thematic material is almost like a no, because just imagine like you hear like the Star Wars theme and you're struggling for that particular zone, and you just hear it over and over, like you'll hate. And I'm sure we all play video games where they have the theme playing over and over, and you just can't beat the fucking level, and it's like, oh my god, So that's definitely like a deathly sin in video game scoring for sure. A lot of what you do is like, for example, layers. So you write like a big piece of music that has like battle drums and percussion and strings, but also has like some ambient pads or more like chill things within it, that it all works cohesively in a piece of music. But what you do is that you print sections of those in like different levels, and then you have a software, there's many out there, but essentially what you do is there's parameters that happen within the video game that trigger the layers to be activated. So like if you're exploring, like you're playing Assassin's Creed or something, you're exploring, layer 1 will be playing when it's just chill, ambient, like not necessarily melodic, nothing. It's just exploring. But then you see some enemies within. So then within the video game, there's stuff that triggers. Maybe your character does this or whatever. So then the music triggers. Layer 2 comes in. So it's like, yes, the ambient, but layer 2 maybe has a drone that is like out of key or something that creates tension, but it's not necessarily. So then the two layers are playing at the same time. But when you actually start fighting, there's parameters again that switch. Layer 3 comes in. That's where the percussion, the action stuff, all that happens. That's all triggered within Unity or Reaper, whatever software you use for the actual video game. When you come out of combat, layer 3 comes out. You have 2 layers, and then like that's sort of how it is. There's many techniques. There's branching, but that would be the main one for sure. And super interesting, because video games are more just like animation. Like you very well put it, like if you were to do the same story like The Quiet with a live action, the budget would just go off the roof, and I think video games are sort of the same thing. Like you can have like interspace travel and dimensions and all these colors, and it opens up for so many musical opportunities. But yeah, that would be the main difference, I would say, with animation, film and video games.
That's fascinating. I think something I always kind of took for granted, when you're playing a video game, and you don't really realize, like, I guess how complicated that must be, especially how with the limitations that you're kind of enforced upon you. Yeah. Sorry, Alejandra, you had your hand up.
I wanted to ask you if you have listened to the soundtrack of a video game which is named Ori and the Blind Forest.
Oh my god,
so beautiful.
That soundtrack has haunted me for years. Like, so my professor, his name is Michael Sweet, for video game scoring. Ori and the Blind Forest is his favorite soundtrack, right? So whenever we would have projects, we would choose video games to like, score. And I chose Ori and the Blind Forest.
Oh my God.
And I was literally in front of the class and he was like, this better be fucking good because that's my favorite video game ever. So I'm like, all right, sure.
Oh no, so much pressure.
I know, spoiler, it wasn't good. So like, but beautiful video game, man.
Yes.
It's amazing. You guys should check it out for sure.
Yes, you should check out the soundtrack of this video game and play the video game. It's nice.
I wasn't expecting to leave tonight with video game recommendations. But
yes.
Okay.
I have a question for Raditya, if we have time.
Yes.
I'm curious to know about like your short, because I looked for it in many websites and I couldn't find it. I'm going to assume that because of festivals you can't look at it until it's released. But I read reviews and I'm so intrigued about like to like watch it. Like, what's it about? Like, what happened? How did you conceptualize this project?
Oh, thank you for the question. And you're right. It's because it's still in the film festival second round, but I can send you kind of a viewing link. And thank you for your interest in it. But don't set expectations too high. No, but with conceptualizing it, I think my writing process for a lot of my short films is very much, I guess, evolutionary. Especially because I'm having to animate it myself, I know it's going to take a lot of time, and so to save time, I'll start animating before I even really know what it's going to be about. So like, I had, I guess, a certain, vision in mind. It started out with this like stars and the sound of a salt shaker and the sun and the sound of a gas stove. And I thought, okay, that's where I'm going to start. And then so it kind of kept building from there. And then a lot of other kind of thoughts I've always had about, and going back to my own personal like feelings and experiences about, sound and isolation, self-awareness, and like the imprisonment of the mind, all that kind of thing. They all kind of, they all kind of come together along as the process go along. And yeah, as I'm making it, I'm always kind of coming up with new ideas, and then the kind of story kind of like finds itself in a way. So for it's very much like I guess an evolutionary work. But now, like my next project that I'm working on is like, with other people, and it's like very much like, okay, we have the script fully written out, and we're going to have like the storyboard and the animatic, and it's all like very much like more structured, which is, I think, a good kind of other end of the spectrum. I really like, doing both is an interesting kind of process.
That's going to be bird drone, no? Like bird drones or something like that. Like you have. Yeah. I'm excited to see it when it comes out.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot.
There's a question I wanted to ask the both of you, but it has to do with what Raditya was saying right now about like working with something that's more structured and stuff. Like, do you improvise whenever making a piece, or do you have like a certain like a structure or a plan, or do you plan like whatever you're going to do? Like, do you have a certain way of working, or like a certain workflow, or do you just however you feel you're going to put it out there?
For me, I think it's probably more on the improvisational side at times. I think I do like kind of having that spontaneity and that kind of thing. But interestingly, a lot of the like, it kind of almost becomes music and like the writing kind of either one influencing the other. For my like earlier short films, I'd actually like listen to a piece of music, like a soundtrack I really liked, and then I'd like form a storyboard in my mind of like what, like just to the music. And like I really always loved like having the the visuals and the music really need to like marry each other, and they really need to be very like intertwined with each other. And so a lot of the times the sound of the music, or what I want would kind of come first, and then that would like influence the visual. And so in that sense, those kind of things were more, I guess, planned in a way because I'm planning it in advance. But yeah, Kevin, how about you? And Alejandra, I want to hear about do you plan a lot in advance, or is it also improvised?
I guess I'm always definitely open to accidents, and you have to always have an open mind, and you play a mistake on the piano and oh shit, that actually sounds good. But I tend to journal a lot. Like I go either to a coffee shop or maybe by myself and kind of write down what my purpose is with the particular film. I remember I was doing a film about a father-daughter relationship, and it was just very complicated, and I could relate to it in many ways with my own family. And I remember journaling about the characters and how they feel, and this guy is super angry and blah blah. And then the more I wrote about them, the more I was sort of writing about me. So then the concept that I came for the film is like, what if I always have two it's called bitonality, so like the music in two keys at the same time, kind of like sometimes depending what keys you choose, it can be very, very dissonant or very consonant, depending what you choose. So kind of like symbolizing the two characters and the conflict depending on what's going on in the scene. And I wouldn't have been able to arrive to that had I not journaled outside of the piano, outside of the music, no guitar, like just be honest with myself about who I am, how do I relate to the film, and what is the purpose of the music here. A lot of times as well, before I even start writing, I sort of like put my piano like in front of me and I just close my eyes and meditate. And there's times where I hear something like a phrase or a conceptual idea, and I go with it. With that being said, accidents, improvise. Sometimes you just like, I'm just gonna play, hit record, and magic can happen. Like I'm definitely always open to that, but I've always been more of a conscious approach. Like this is where I'm going. Let's do it.
I really love what you said there about having the two keys for the different characters and having dissonant and kind of harmonizing them at different points in the context and their relationship. Like that's really
dug myself into a hole there because his bitonality is just hard to write. So like, but yes, it worked.
Alejandra, what about you?
I think what Kevin is saying about accidents is so accurate, and it really relates to me because I think I am a very chaotic person whenever I work, and my workflow is just all over the place sometimes. But I mean, somehow I find creativity in chaos and not so much in order. Like sometimes I feel like I'm working in a more orderly manner, especially when I'm working with other people, because you have to kind of find like a common place, right? But whenever I'm working by myself, it's just, I improvise a lot. Like I think whenever I plan something, it never goes as I planned it originally. Like it's just a lot of things happen in between, and I encounter many things along the way. And then like I remember when I was learning how to use Pro Tools, and I didn't really know anything about audio and about engineering or about how certain plugins worked or why it sounded differently whenever you put a plugin, or like I didn't really know. I was just experimenting, and I would, use these different plugins and try to understand what it was doing to the sound. And then I found, for instance, I found a certain plugin that would, modify the audio in a way that I wanted. However, I didn't really know what it really was for, or the purpose of that plugin. But in the innocence of not knowing, I think I learned so much, like just really not knowing the purpose of certain, tools. However, finding a way of using them and creating a totally different purpose for them, I think that is how I started in the whole audio post-production and audio and sound arts, and just in chaos, in really not knowing how things worked, but just finding my way in there. and just kind of making my own structure, like just, yeah, and making my own ways of working, because I have a lot of problems with structures. Like I can never really follow some, like a certain, order, a certain way of making things. I remember when I started playing the piano, I never really had any I never took any lessons or anything. I just started playing as I felt. When I started using the instruments the way I thought I could use it, and the way I felt. And my sister, she took piano lessons for a long time, ever since she was little, and she knows how to play. She knows how to read music sheets, and she's very talented, you know. And whenever she listened to me playing, and like contrasting a little bit the ways in which we approach the piano, like the same instrument, she would tell me, like, I would feel the pressure, not because of her, just because of life. I would feel the pressure to, if I wanted to make music, I needed to know like how to read music sheets, and I needed to know the more academic part of it, and I needed to know about music theory and about music, like, you know, in a more theoretic manner. And she would tell me, like, well, I know like how to read music sheets, and I have taken piano lessons before, and I listen to you play, and I feel like you don't really have a structure, and that's okay. And not having a structure really is beautiful in a way, because you tend to make your own structures as you go, and that is very, like, I don't know, for me that has been the way I work, just like approaching to things with a certain innocence, you know, and then finding your way in those things and make it work.
I love how it's kind of like your, like, I guess almost kind of that self-improvement like process. As you're kind of going along, you're learning about yourself just as much as you're, you know, learning
It's
about
the
how
process of discovery, no?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, totally.
Okay. Well, any other questions?
I have some questions before any of you go on. For Kiyoshi, because he's a really interesting professor, and I want you guys to get to know him because he's really cool. And one for the rest of you. So let's start with Kiyoshi. Kiyoshi, I will, because of the main theme of this first edition of the magazine is the team process. I would love to know how you started off, like the first moment you thought of yourself of a composer, like that you were in this for real. Because I saw today a video that you uploaded in Instagram. I think it was like 6 years ago when you had short hair and you were playing a guitar. So I wanted to know a little bit how your road ended up here, being an academic, being a professor. Like how did you get here? So if you could tell a little bit to the four of us.
It's a long and tiresome story, I guess, that nobody's really interested in listening to. But I started. Well, I've been a musician since I was a very little boy, and I played in rock bands and stuff. I guess I come from the rock tradition, and the way Kevin says it, you know, yeah, exactly, in the rock tradition, like most, you know, guys that play music, right? So that's kind of where I was. And then when I was in college, my friends studied film and communications, and they were making their, you know, their projects for school, their short films and their projects and so on. And I kind of always ended up making music or recording the sound because I had, you know, some microphones and stuff to record music at home. This is pretty rudimentary stuff back in the late 90s, right? So, you know, I had like a small tape, multi-track tape recorder that could record 4 tracks. It was amazing, you know? And so I started, you know, kind of collaborating with my friends in doing music and sound and recording effects and doing these things with them. And, you know, by the time we all moved on from college, from the university, those collaborations became professional collaborations, you know, and they became people who were actually making, you know, real films. And I was the one making sound and music for their real films. So it kind of happened out of circumstance, I guess. But out of circumstance, because I wasn't studying communications or film, I studied philosophy. Was my undergraduate degree, and then I studied communications as my master's degree much later. So I kind of always had the world of academics and theory back there, but that's how I ended up working in media production and film and TV and so on. And at one point, I kind of got tired of you know, the freelance lifestyle, I guess, you know, being my own boss. It's really liberating, but it's also very tiring, you know? And so I kind of made the Paso De La Muerte, right? We say in Mexico. That's like it's a very famous thing that happens in the Mexican sort of rodeo, I guess, where a guy jumps from one running horse onto another running horse. That's the Paso de Death, the step of death, right? So I kind of did that and moved from film and TV and commercials to the academy, where I've been comfortably ensconced ever since. But well, I guess I teach media and film and sound and music, so I guess I'm still doing the same thing, right? I'm just doing it with people who are in this process of discovery, right? So it's my job now to accompany people who are discovering and sort of finding their way in this area.
Okay, so
I hope that wasn't too boring.
No.
Or too long.
We wanted more, but okay. So the last question is for, again, the four of you. So what was the biggest moment you have? I know like Kevin already said that he fears like when he's starting a new process. Like, I don't know how you felt when you first talked to me about the Kickstarter, if you have like this thing in mind, like to talk to people, but what was the moment where you feared about the subject that you chose to study and you were like, well, maybe this is not what I have to do. I don't know if for the quiet Radea, you have one moment in which you were like, I don't know, you just studied 2 degrees. I was going to say dos in Spanish. You studied 2 degrees. You study, what is it? Is
I did screen arts and marketing.
Yeah, you studied too. Like, which was the moment? Did you have any moment of fear? Like you were okay because your parents. I saw an interview that your parents didn't really wanted you to study that. Like, I don't know if Ale, Kevin, or Kiyoshi, you had one moment of doubt when you were like, you know what, I'm not gonna make it. Like, this country is not good enough. Like, I don't know, being a freelancer is really hard. This is not like really bonding. Like when you were like about to drop it up. Like, I know you're really young, we're really young, but it happens sometimes that you get feel of fear. So if you had any moment like this you want to share it with us, it would be amazing.
Okay, I guess I'll start. Yeah, I think yeah, probably my biggest kind of fear moment, I suppose, would be kind of career-wise, looking at what I wanted to do. When I was in high school, like we didn't have a film subject, but so it was something I kind of always wanted, you know, whenever I had any spare time, I would like be watching tutorials about how to use software, and I'd be making, like running around using I didn't have a camera, so I had my dad's like MacBook Air and use the webcam as my camera and make like terrible iMovie videos. Like it was, but going into uni, I mean, I've always been a very creative person, and I really wanted to go into the arts, but my parents were like very like adamantly against, like they said you can study anything except for an arts degree. And you know, it did come from a place of love and concern about, you know, about, I guess, stability in my life. But for the first year in uni, I studied marketing under a commerce degree, because literally just because it was the most creative out of all the options there. And I think over time, I still kept creating, and I still kept, you know, doing films whenever I had time. And then I think they definitely started to you know, be more supportive of my passion and what I wanted to do. But I think even, you know, knowing I wanted to do it, I mean, there's always that feeling of like, this industry is so competitive, and, you know, there's, I guess, you know, you're always wondering about like stability and opportunity for, you know, people of color, you know, or women. Like, you know, I have privilege in that respect, but also, you know, you're also daunted by these other kind of challenges. And so it's, yeah, that I think I'm still, you know, just always, you know, we're still always worried about that, you know, looking into the future. But I think it always came back to something that I've always heard, but I never really like, I kind of always like brushed it off. But, you know, if you're like doing what you love for your job, you know, it's not really a job. And it's, you know, it feels like more, I guess, the love of your life in terms of what you're, you know, wanting to pursue. And so, yeah, I think that would probably be my kind of fear in that sense. I don't know if I answered the
Alejandra.
Yes, for me, it was something very similar from Radilla, because, well, I initially wanted to study philosophy or literature, but I ended up in communications because, of course, of a certain pressure, which is not really just about my parents' concern about my future, but also because also such socially and stereotypically, the way they portray people who study philosophy, no offense, Kiyoshi. No, no. But I mean, the way my parents conceived, like, how, what it meant to study philosophy or what it meant to study literature was you know, it was in a very negative light. So they were very, they were not really supporting my decision for me to study one of those. So then I felt the pressure to just like choose something else. However, I am truly grateful that I chose communications, because I think that it was the best decision I could have taken, especially because I found sound. I found sound on the way, and sound arts and sound design. And I think I felt really in love with that, with sound, and with communicating with sound and making meaning with sound. And so I think I feel very grateful for that, for having chosen communications. But I think it just, I can really relate with what you were saying, because for me it was just the same. I really didn't know what was best for me and for my future, and didn't really know how to listen to myself rather than listening to other people's concern about my future. And I prioritized my parents' voice over mine. And that is not at all bad or negative. I was younger, and of course, they were protecting me in a way. But I am truly grateful I chose what I chose, because I really fell in love with what I studied and what I do now. But of course, there's the pressure of economic income, right? And then, like, I started freelance, and of course it was difficult, because you never really have stability, and you never have like secure income every month, and you don't have like all of this financial stability that maybe people around you have. And you start feeling this kind of pressure around you, and you make yourself feel kind of stressed. And I don't know, it's just horrible. Like right now I am working at an audio post-production studio and music studio, and I really love it. And of course, like, I have I can now compare, like, what I was living before as freelance. Like, I still freelance, but this is more of a stable job, right? But then, like, there's this question: what do you want to sacrifice? Like, do you want to sacrifice your happiness for the sake of gaining a lot of money? Or do you want to sacrifice gaining a lot of money for your happiness? Like, for me, it came to that kind of, like, because of all this pressure that I was feeling of my family and my parents, like, you have to make like more money, like that's not enough for you and stuff. So like it came to me, like that question came to me, and I was like, no, I want to be happy with what I have now, and I feel like I'm making something that makes me feel very satisfied, and just I don't need anything else, truly. So yes, that's it.
Kevin?
I have a couple. I think my first big reality hit was not getting into the school that I wanted to go, because I'm a musician, and that sort of becomes who you are, and like what you kind of like, the worth you put to yourself as a person. It's like you're the music guy, right? So when I got rejected from Berklee the first time, it's sort of like, okay, maybe I'm not that good. I definitely was not. I don't know, so you kind of like sort of question everything, but I kept trying, and eventually after a third audition I was able to get in finally. Another one was actually being in the school and knowing that there's people from so many countries that go into this school, and so much excellence like surrounds you all the time, of any there's producers, there's sound designers, there's composers, there's jazz composers, there's anything, songwriters. So every day going into class and then listening to other people's music and examples, you're like, wow, like who am I compared to these giants, so there's always that sort of fear of like going into the world and not really being as good as you think you are. And I don't know if I really like, fear always lingers for me in the back of my mind. Like I'm always, thinking like maybe I'm not who I say I am. Like maybe I'm not meant for this. Maybe I'm just kind of like I said, faking my way, but I have a ceiling that perhaps I may not be able to surpass. That's always there. And I always thinking like, I could have done whatever, accounting or something else, but I think I always have very present the fact that nothing in life is set. And we can believe like being a doctor is more stable, but that's just not true. Like, because, I could be a lawyer, doctor, or I go out to get some groceries and then I get run over by a car. You know what I mean? Like, death really is lingering everywhere, and the door opens and you can never know when it comes. So I always kind of like subside the fear with saying like, well, I don't want to like draw my last breath not doing music. You know what I mean? Like sure, maybe it's hard, like doing freelancing, and this month I'm short $200, and then the next one I made an extra $1,000 or whatever it is. But I think that's just much more worth it. Makes me just be more present and appreciative that every day I wake up and do it. It's time really is the most valuable asset. It's not something you can buy, inherit, steal, nothing. It's just you just have the time that you're given in the earth, and that's it, period. So I think I value that over everything. And to give you a short answer, fear, yes, everywhere, every time, every second, but hope is bigger.
Yeah, well, I'd have to agree with your last statement, Kevin. Fear is always there in the back of your mind. As I grow older, I think that the only thing that's different is that I've gotten used to it, right? So I'm not as freaked out, or it doesn't kind of make my whole world fall apart like it used to. It's always there. Sorry?
Send me tips when you can of managing that, because yeah. I am just not good at that.
Well, yeah, that's basically it. You just kind of get used to it because it's always there. I mean, you always feel like you're gonna fail, or like everything's gonna go wrong, or that you're gonna get fired, or in my case, now that I have a stable job, oh, everything's fine now, but now now I'm scared of getting fired. What if I piss off my boss and now he wants to get rid of me, and I'll lose all of this stability that I've constructed for myself, And before that, it was, where's my next paycheck gonna come from? What if I lose all my clients? What if I say something stupid in one of my recording sessions and they never want to come back? Or I make some song that doesn't work and they don't like it, or whatever. So that's always there, and I think that's part of what makes us kind of I guess, like, in this sort of Instagram age where everything's supposed to be positive and bright and sunny, we're not used to thinking of fear in a positive way, or even depression and negative thoughts, but they're part of how our mind works. They're supposed to be there, right? And it's healthy to have those feelings, but you have to kind of incorporate them and turn them into integrate them into your life so that you kind of grow through those feelings, as opposed to letting them take over you, right? But basically that just gets easier as you get older because you get used to it more, no? So yeah, that's my words of wisdom for you young folks.
I was gonna ask you to say like a little advice moment for the four of us, but you already did it. It was naturally given. So thank you so much, Kiyoshi. And I don't know if any of you want to ask another question, want to say anything else, want to share something so that you can watch. You can feel free to do so. I don't know if Kiyoshi, if you have time. So totally it was gonna be 1 hour and it's like longer. So if you guys have time, we could do that. If not, that's great. And this will be the end of the Zoom.